Peter Allen, Emeritus Professor from Cranfield University. And I know you worked with Prigogine. You were a theoretical physicist for many years before you came to Cranfield. But I'd be really interested to know a little bit about how you would position Prigogine's contribution to the field of complexity theory. What would you say about Prigogine? That's my first question.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think the really important point that he got way before many people was the idea of symmetry breaking, because it's totally fundamental. And it means that systems can self-organize and structures can change qualitatively. And he understood with the chemical, the Belousov-Zhabotinsky reaction showed that a chemical system could create patterns that moved or didn't move, and that the red and the blue chemicals were, and the significant point was that it required the reactions to be continuing. If they were, so providing you were providing energy and matter, if you like, then the system could self-organize. And in many ways, given that self-organization can lead to emergent characteristics and emergent capabilities, then in a way, in the history of the world, it's very important for kind of an evolutionary view. And it's what takes us beyond hard science, classical science, which is all based on repeatable experiments. And of course, then it gives you very solid answers. And the only problem is that repeatable experiments mustn't include anything living, active, and reactive, let's say, and certainly not learning. That's even more terrible. Yeah. So in fact, science automatically excluded really all of biology and of course social science and everything.
So Peter, can I just take you back
to
just define symmetry breaking, and perhaps say a bit more about what you might call open systems. So
Well, the Zhabotinsky reaction is what Prigogine spotted, let's say, and Zhabotinsky must have spotted something, but we're not quite sure what. The point is that by having chemical reactions which were non-linear, in other words, they fed back on the reaction as it was happening, so that if one of the intermediates was blue and the other was red, you could have it that instead of just having the average everywhere, it could set off into different places with a lot of X and a lot of Y, and so you get patterns of red and blue. And so this is he spotted that this was extraordinarily significant,
and that is symmetry breaking.
Exactly, because the example for symmetry breaking that I always use is origami, and the reason is the following: if you have a two-dimensional sheet of paper, it has no characteristics other than, and it can't do anything. It has no capabilities other than being a sheet of paper, because you can write on it. That's good, but that's all. Whereas if you fold it, which means you break the symmetry of the two dimensions, you go into a third dimension at least, then you create shapes and forms that can have capabilities, that can have properties, capabilities, and so on and so forth. So, that is fundamental. So, and of course, okay, that's a sheet of paper. And you say, well, there wasn't sheets of paper lying around, but there were molecules, long molecules, and long molecules can wind themselves into chains, which can make sheets, or can not make sheets. And so you can get sheets with strings attached and so on and so forth. And as we're discovering with the virus today, little things with knobs on and all that can have extraordinarily remarkable properties. And that's it.
So there are the agency of having an open system, the agency of exchange of energy and matter, or information indeed, with the wider world is
exactly
what creates the symmetry breaking.
Yeah.
So is it that there are two aspects to it? The non-linearity is partly a function of the open system, but it's also to do with the reflexive relationships. So you've got two characteristics of complex systems, a sort of reflexive relationships within it, but also that the energy required through it being open to the wider environment.
Yes, and it implies also that when you do some maths and you want to put a wall around your system, and you can say we're going to model what's inside our system and not what's outside. We'll say that's fixed, or we say it's at equilibrium. We'll say something, and of course that's not true. In reality, the world and everything on it are connected, and sooner or later, of course, we will realize that.
Yes.
But because the idea of repeatable experiments automatically cuts off all of these creative forces, essentially.
Yeah. So, but if you had an open system that in a sense had linear interactions within it, you wouldn't get emergent properties. So you need you need two qualities: the kind of reflexive relationships within it and the openness to the wider world.
Right. Yes. You've got to get energy in, because you've got to, if you decrease entropy in your system, then if you decrease entropy in the system, it's paid for by the outside world sending in energy and entropy, So the entropy of the universe increases all the time.
Yes.
But you can have a system part of that, which has growing organization and order and capabilities.
But if the internal system was more like a machine, like cogs and wheels, being open wouldn't really have much impact.
No. I mean, in fact, that's if you like, the limits to the sort of modeling that was being done, even by systems thinking people, that it was essentially building a mechanical system that would represent the situation as it is, so to speak.
Yes.
And then, of course, it doesn't evolve.
No. So you need both characteristics. That's fabulous. Thank you.
Okay.
So can I move you on then to, I know you have contributed an awful lot to developing from that kind of tradition of Prigogine. I wonder if you can say a little about how you would summarize your big ideas, your big contributions to this field.
Well, I suppose that, in terms of, basically, I could see this had many applications, and I started off really, I did do some kind of ecological studies, but on the whole, I just started off for reasons of funding on cities and human populations and their spatial structures, and how roads and houses and shops and businesses, etc., are all linked together, and they co-evolve essentially. And the modeling initially for quite a long time was about how the structures could evolve and require different energy, for transport and all sorts of things. I think we already showed that it didn't necessarily mean that it was obvious that cities were minimum entropy production and so on. All of those principles don't really apply once you've got living things doing it, because they believe, they have their beliefs and hopes, etc. The one thing that was missing for many years in the modeling that I was doing was the actual evolution of individuals. In other words, the initial models in urban modeling, for example, I used variables like density of blue-collar workers and white-collar workers, and of industry and heavy industry and so on. But of course, all of that's evolved. And in fact, that's a very, inadequate description of the system now. And it's even, it's wrong even. And that's because life changed. And so the desires and the needs of people changed over time as well. And the ways of satisfying those demands changed as well. So essentially, the models, even though they're of course wonderful, never took into account evolution of people, let's say, for urban models. So in fact, technologies also obviously changed and so on. But I think that so now, the work that I've been involved with in more recent years involves learning, if you like. And what we tend to find is that what was sought for by business using science, intermediate science, was they wanted certainty. They wanted prediction. And everything really was based on prediction. Contracts were based on prediction. So people built models of things, but these models were essentially mechanical fixed models, really. So they could churn, but they couldn't change. And so that's what I tried to introduce. Was the ability of the thing to change, basically.
One of the things I remember you saying to me some years ago, and I think it came out of your ecological work, was in a sense the role of variation, the kind of the ability for variation to include current structures, which isn't exactly the same as the evolution of the individual, but still seemed a very important point that you placed variation and messiness as kind of central to the systems can't evolve without messiness, and you looked at how how that invasion happens. Have I got that right?
Yeah. And I mean the problem is, I find it with groups as if I'm such a wonderful speaker that I convince everybody that I'm completely right. Then we'll all have that same idea. And although my idea says, yes, but you don't know because there is variation and so on and so forth, and you can't tell how somebody will react or think of something new and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, if everybody agrees, on the whole, that's not the most creative situation. And it also means that it can only respond to some new threat or something in a limited number of ways, which is about the sort of mainstream thinking, you might say. And of course, so you've got this tricky balance. The evolution requires people to disagree, and that leads to long-term success of the whole system. But of course, that's still with people disagreeing, and that's how it can keep evolving. If we all agree, then nothing will happen anymore.
No. But I think my memory is that from the 1970s that the papers that you wrote on Darwin's finches really interrogated that issue of variation and invasion. So that was quite an early idea in a way.
Oh, it was. Yes, I think the full kind of strength of what we're saying didn't hit me really. I was too busy, I think, trying to get contracts to survive, but now I see it very clearly, and because I'm in the sort of philosophy group and all this, and so we chew over and I try to write comprehensible text for people who are not scientists or anything. And but it's become clear to me that this key issue was this idea of repeatable experiments. And the fact is that what we're saying is that if you have learning objects in the system, then it's not going to be repeatable.
No.
In the sense of old physics.
No. And I remember you talking a lot about limits to knowledge and the fact that it isn't that we can't know it. It's that the knowledge doesn't exist yet.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So
because that's right. Because in fact, the future is not fixed.
No, it can't be known. It can't be predicted.
Exactly. And the large scale feeds back on the medium scale and on the little scale, and the little scale feeds up onto the medium scale, onto the big scale. So it's actually a complex system.
Yeah, very good. Brilliant. Well, that was my third question. Really was just about, if you had several £1 million, to invest in the future of complexity thinking. What do you think is missing in the future? Is it more philosophical? Is it, like Paul Cilliers felt, more ethical? Is it more scientific? What do you feel is needed to keep this alive and move us forward?
Well, that's a very good question. I think, yes, I mean, this sort of paradox of having all agreeing, we all agree it's all complex. People just say, oh, it's complex. Oh, yeah. And we can do that with multi-agent modeling and stuff like this. But in reality, they put in today's agents, if they, some description of it, and then that's fixed, really. Mm-hmm. And so these are not learning, changing entities. And so it misses that richness of possible behavior. And I think that, so part of our issue, one of the main issues really is, for example, when you do really large scale investments of a particular piece of infrastructure, like one bridge or one tunnel or something like that, it's enormously expensive. It doesn't follow that it will be used forever. Mm. And the question of, following the pandemic, many less people will travel every day. Mm. So even though people will get back as quick as they can to what they think is normal, on the other hand, they say, well, I don't have to rent an office in the center of a city that's very expensive. Mm. We could have people coming in one day a week to and the rest of the time they work like we're doing. And that's obviously proved itself to quite a lot of millions of people already. So that changes a whole lot of things. So investments that are bottom up are maybe better than investments that are top down, or they may be longer lasting, let's say. Mm-hmm. So investments in education and in learning and methods of learning and so on, and exploring may be of more value than putting in giant industrially, because the real reason for that was economies of scale, you might say. And I think that with modern technology, economies of scale diminish a bit, and our ability to not have to all huddle in a big city and all goes to the center of it to work.
Yeah. So in a variety of ways, it's a move more to decentralization and localism in a variety of ways, which might be energy, it might be working hubs, it might be communities and how they operate. But
that's right.
In terms of the thinking around complexity, I'm interested, for example, in the kind of coming together of process philosophy and complexity, and have gone back to Merleau-Ponty and Heidegger and various people and indeed towards Taoism, which you'll remember introducing me to by accident many years ago, having picked up a book on the Tao Te Ching and seeing its similarities with complexity thinking. But do you feel there's something needed more? Are there ideas that I guess it's the ability to deal with the evolution of the individual, isn't it, to be able to deal with?
Well, yes, because the key to maintaining the capacity to evolve is tolerance, and so law and order and all these things are very difficult issues, because tolerance doesn't mean you can go around doing whatever you like, but allowing other people to think differently to you is tolerance, and that's very fundamental, and in a way that doesn't normally figure in mathematical models.
No, or in human systems these days.
Or in human systems, indeed, yes, because I'm the boss.
Yeah, yes, but there's a kind of one wonders whether we kind of embrace diversity enough just generally in life.